I'm not patient. What the fuck is? Hey, Brian.
Ryan, you need to just. This is a song you should listen to. Listen to this song.
It sounds more exciting than what it is.
Let's see how we can lose our next 3 listeners.
Can I tell my goddamn story?
Let's try to work on our people skills.
Can I tell my goddamn story?
Now, what are we talking about?
Testicles 1 2. Testicles 1 2. Here we are. All right. Dennis, the Menace Cullen, will be joining us here very shortly. And as has been said, I'm pretty sure earlier, this is our addendum, appendices, whatever the fuck you want to call it, to the previous part 1 and part 2 Dennis episode where we talked about bands and stuff. And apparently I got a lot of complaints, a lot meaning 3 people who noticed it. One who really complained that apparently Dennis wasn't able to get a word in edgewise in the second episode, and that was mostly because I was cramming information into a 2-hour conversation that I knew had to end pretty shortly. So we missed some stuff. We missed a few bands and all that of Dennis's and mine that had some crossovers. So this is our makeup session where it will mostly be Dennis talking. We'll be putting focus on that. Because also we kind of glazed over some of Dennis's history in the DIY community. He was kind of one of the pioneers of the DIY scene, at least in our area in the East Bay. DIY meaning do it yourself, which was pretty much the underground music scene of zines, magazines, which are zines, punk versions of them, homemade zines. And you know, everything just working through the mail, getting demos and records, and CDs were a little bit later, but mostly cassettes and some vinyl records that were basically it was an evolution from the early hardcore punk days in the 80s, the early 80s hardcore punk scene of mostly the United States. And here he is. All right. Joining us back on the show front in Portland. Another angle. Look at this. It's a sweeter angle there of your garage.
I moved things around in here.
Nice. Hang on, I gotta answer a question. Somebody's asking if I have a bong. No, I don't own.
Do you still have a bong, Dave?
No, I don't own a bong anymore. I gave all that shit away right after, like in the months after my arrest, and started going to meetings and shit. Actually, I think I had one for a while. I did have some utensils still for a while.
Just in case, huh?
You never know. Yeah, you never know.
Nostalgia.
Yeah, I mean, well, mainly, you just never. It's like, well, we'll see how this recovery shit works out. But so I was saying, in a brief introduction. I don't know if I'll keep in this episode. This is the making amends to you for not letting you get a word in edgewise in the second hour. This is mostly on behalf of the numerous complaints I got, 3, 2 of which weren't complaints, just observations. One of which was a flat out complaint from somebody who rarely watches the show, but has a big voice in it, and also who knows your history. And that was, so this is really for Mario Rodriguez.
Oh.
Yes, this is specifically, I am rubbing this episode in Mario's face. As soon as we get this up and all that, I'm actually going to text him the link and make sure he gets all of this information in, going down memory lane, because it's actually, I think it was something too, after we did the episode, there's a lot. And I was trying to cram in everything in that second hour that was basically just the 6 degrees of our band, Snowy Plover.
Yeah.
But there was a lot that we missed because, again, you were part of we glazed over this. You were part of you were the only one in our East Bay area at the time, in Newark at least, who was part of a pioneer of this DIY scene around music.
That's funny. Yeah, I remember you said that, and I never really thought of it. But looking back, it's funny to think that I was the only one into
You were.
all
And
that death metal and shit.
I mean, because we did talk about it a little bit, just in the sense that you were, being able to kind of like carry a level of confidence in yourself in just doing literally your own thing, but it connected you with so many people elsewhere, like a lot of people who were kind of the same people in their areas. I'm reading a book about Brian that Brian Walsby just put out, the Self and Punishment book. Highly recommend.
Oh yeah,
it's $20, $22.50 plus with the shipping.
right.
Best money I spent. I'm already halfway through it, and I haven't even taken that many shits.
Did you see me posting those Man-Childs?
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
Elvis CDs, pretty nice. Good stuff.
And the thing about what Walsby echoes, what it reminds me of you, is the fact that he was being one of the few people who stumbles into something that they have a strong interest in, and then kind of, and because he started drawing, got into art, had stuff in Maximum Rock and Roll, early Maximum Rock and Roll, and Flipside, and whereas you got into what you got into, and we're like, you know what, I'm gonna make a zine of this shit and put this out. So I guess talk about what prompted you to do that. What was the inspiration behind all that?
I think I was just bored, sheltered kid in my bedroom. I had gotten to a couple shows like the Stone, and I think I got a few flyers, and always seeking the heavy music. So I just sent out for some demos, and then started getting other flyers, and I think I got a flyer for a zine. So I sent it out, and I'm like, oh wow, look at this, I could do this. And I was like literally 14 years old. So I think my first issue, I pretty much just said, well, what are these guys writing in this? Okay, I'll write something just like that in mine. Mm-hmm. It was really not not very original material at all. I was really lifting stuff off of what other people were doing.
But still, I mean, that's imitation. That's what we all do. I mean, you imitate your idols, or you imitate what you're doing until you kind of find your own groove. To anybody like me or the other people who knew you but didn't know anything about this, that's our first exposure. So you're really kind of like, reflecting it, echoing what's out there in the ether, and kind of introducing it to us.
And it was great just getting linked into a network of tape traders, and pen pals and zines and demo tapes of bands, and it just opened me up to a big world of just totally underground music, and always seeking heavier stuff. I was into thrash metal, and then I got into death metal, and then grindcore, whatever, hardcore punk, and then it just and then everything kind of just ended up melding together at that point.
But it introduced you to these certain people that, as we glazed, again, we touched upon it in the previous episode, because one of those people that you came across with was Dan Lactose.
Right. He reminded me of how we met, because I was trying to think, I couldn't quite remember. But he actually came over to my house with Max one day, and that's how we met. He's like, they were skateboarding in the Newark ditch. You remember that, over by Highway 84?
I remember.
He's like, hey, let's go visit my buddy Dennis. And they came over, and then so we must have kind of become fast friends at that point, because he and I, he was in a band called Clout, and he was doing zines. He was in Sheep Squeeze. I think that might have already ended by that point, and I think he was a year younger than me as far as school goes, and then Max was a year older than me, and he ended up somehow inviting me, I guess, into his band Clout, which I always kind of considered after the fact. I think I kind of crashed that band, or possibly even ruined that band. But I don't know, that some of the other guys, I'm not sure if they were too stoked about Dennis coming in, kind of wiry Dennis, high strung. Because I recently saw a video, kind of infamous video of I played one gig with them out in El Granada, actually, right near where you used to live, at that preschool right there by Highway 1. And I remember I was very influenced by Kindred. He was McCune of Plutocracy, and I remember seeing him. I was fresh off of like seeing them play like Gilman or something, and he just had high energy. And just like jumping through the air, and I was like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. That that's So immediately, like, once our first note hit in Clout, where we after some intro or something. I remember jumping up and my guitar like bashed me in the face, and blood ran ran into my eye. So all I saw was blood, and so I thought it was really bad. I'm like, oh no, what happened? I kind of took off and I looked for a bathroom, and then I looked in the mirror. I'm like, oh, it's just a little bit of, little scrape,
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back in and played, but I had heard that there was always a video for that out there, and I finally saw it.
Yeah.
And it's so embarrassing. I don't even think I even watched the video to the point of where, early in the video where I did that jump or whatever that
I saw the video. I don't remember that happening. I mean, the way the angle of the video, you don't even really, I think you kind of like see the three people, because there were three people. There was three guitar players, so I was the third guitar player.
That's what I remember. If that illustrates.
And there's a row of them, so I don't even think you really see that, but you do see, of all people, Frank, Ramon Salcedo, Frankie Ripple of the West Bay Doom Riders, of Agents of Satan, and all of that. When he was,
I've never actually met him. I don't think in person.
I think you have You might have it once.
Maybe like then. I just and all those West Bay guys, man, they have so many nicknames.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I didn't know who was who like all the time. It's like, oh wait, you're so and so. Oh yeah, I remember. Okay, it's like, wow, how many nicknames have you gone through at this point? And
I remember you had a recording of them on KFJC of, I think it was Plutocracy. And I remember seeing the logo and thinking like this was like an intense death metal band of some kind or whatever. And then you hear them and they all sound like they're rappers. And it's mainly Kindred, just like, yeah, West Bay,
that's right.
And one of the things he says is clout. He said when he's like listing off all the bands from
he
the
used
West
to always
Bay.
Give props. Yeah,
All
in
the
fact,
shout-outs, yeah.
I remember the last time I saw him. I hadn't seen him in many years, and we played out at the Pioneer Saloon with Calmex and the Riff Merchants, with you, I'm sure, and probably Bug Pedals. Right. I remember those guys partying, and I was like, oh man, like those guys could party, and he was at that point a burly,
big dude,
scary looking dude. Always so sweet to me, man. He came up, he was oh yeah, he hadn't seen me in so long, and he was so nice to me, and he was like naming off times that we had hung out, and Clout. He's like, Clout, yeah. and I think he probably appreciated that I put him on the cover of that zine, with him jumping through the air. It was always a good photo.
That was one of the things. I actually was hesitant to meet him for so long when I first came across him, because I knew of his infamy, and I knew he was also having drug issues at the time. And so I was always the quiet dude that would like be sheepishly like just like hiding in the corner.
Dave Anonymous. Speaking of nicknames,
exactly.
You've always worn the nicknames well.
And but he would pop in when they used to have the Compound recording. They had this spot that they called the Compound, where like the rap group of theirs, the Compound, would record, and Dan was recording there, and the Riff Merchants would practice there, and then when Kindred was kind of like in one of his more, when he was kind of like in and out of his attic kind of shit, he popped in one day and was hanging out, and I could just tell it's like he's like, who's this motherfucker? Like he just had that kind of like, he wanted to ask, and I'm just sitting here and it's like, I'm a fan of your shit, but I'm not trying to meet you, dude. like I've heard too many stories. And it's funny because then after we crossed paths so many times, then eventually, of course we had to talk, and then I got to know him, got to even know him even better after the fall. We'll get to all that shit later, but yeah, and I have a lot of love for that guy.
You ended up becoming pretty embedded in that scene.
A little bit.
It's like you might not consider yourself, but you're one of the guys. You wouldn't pass any of those guys on the sidewalk without them coming over.
I'd always say hi to them. I love those guys. And I had one of the best 2 weeks of my life going on tour with those guys. And
best and worst.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say worse. No,
I know you had some funny stories out of that.
Oh no, and there's definitely the whole the shit that went down. But the thing about it, here's the thing about it too. None of that would have been possible had it not been, I would say, for your association with Dan because not only did you do so you joined Clout, but then after that we're gonna get to the other bands that you did right after that. But because of your association with Dan, me knowing that, I never really followed Spaz. The other guys that I jammed with, post Snowy Plover and the Tonopah and all that shit, those guys were big Spaz heads. And I knew Spaz, I'd heard Spaz, I might even had a Spaz album. But it was Paul Barfo. I became friends with God Stomper, Paul and Danny. And so I was actually hanging out with Paul from time to time. And I went with him to the only Spaz show I ever saw, which was the last Spaz show at Gilman. It was my first time at Gilman, and it's packed. Everybody's got cameras. Everybody's filmed. Like, that was the thing that I was more like, dude, what the fuck? Like, more people have cameras filming this shit. It was one of the things that kind of blew my mind. And like, isn't anybody just going to enjoy the show? Everybody's got cameras, so clearly, everybody's really the self-awareness of this.
You gotta document it, man.
Oh God, it was kind of nauseating. But they had a great show. I was really impressed just watching them play and enjoy them. So, just I was lucky I got in, because not many people, like, it was over capacity.
Right.
But after that show, not too long after that, I was at a show, and I don't remember which one, but it was at the Cactus Club. Some band was playing. It wasn't a huge packed show, but I remember seeing Dan there with his girlfriend at the time. And I knew who he was based on seeing him at that show. And I remember putting it together, like, that's the guy that Dennis had a band with that I think was called Happy.
You knew that he was in that project.
I knew that you guys hung out and jammed, because I never met him then, but you told me about it, that you and him had a brief band before.
Well, what's funny is he that band was more Trey and I.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You had another guy, Trey, that was in it.
Yeah, he was the drummer, and he and I had that printing and graphics class together over at Logan High School. And we met. He was in a metal band that had just broken up, and he was.
What was that band?
They were called Hades or something like that. I don't know. I used to have their demo, and I can't find it anymore. It's a bummer. Mm-hmm. I'll have to get back to you on that. But
he wasn't known for anything other than.
No, they just had a demo.
Okay.
Yeah, and then and they were just kind of a metal band. I don't quite remember them too well. Mm-hmm. I know I had their demo for a while, and I always wished I held on to it. But he was really into the shit I was turning him on to, with like Infest and Crossed Out. It was super fast. I think that was really, when you just don't know about that stuff until you do. And No Comment and all that stuff, just like, check this stuff out,
Yeah.
And I Hate God, and he's
the Bastard. That was another band we didn't bring up. That was an influential band.
That was kind of a weird band. Like, I remember I was really into that band, but that's an acquired taste type of band for sure. I think. They
were part of the. I mean, they were
definitely
growing around that time.
Totally, yeah. And they still are. But and then he and I were just jamming, and so his band broke up, and he moved his big double bass drum kit into my garage, much to my mom's chagrin, I'm sure. And we would just hash it out all the time, and he was so much fun. I listened to rehearsals, and he put up with my shit. So I'm listening to me, I'm like, no, do this, and like, and we do it like that. I'm like, yeah, wait, no, just do it like this, and he would just totally like go with what I was into. It's like, oh, try do double bass right here, yeah, that'd be rad. I'm such a schmuck, and and then we did that demo, and I was just kind of like, not long term, but what's the word I'm thinking of? But like long distance with Dan, even though he lived across the bay.
But that felt like long distance at those times.
Yeah, it was. We just somehow decided that he would do. He agreed to do some vocals on that. And this is, I think, right around the time they started Spaz. I thought it was before Spaz, but I'm looking back thinking they might have already started Spaz.
Again, Spaz, the way that after watching their video on the one that I just saw recently, they did on YouTube, him and Max.
Right, I saw that clip that you put.
Yeah, that I highly recommend checking that out, because it's pretty cool just hearing their background and all that stuff, and how they originally the band started similarly to what Happy was. It was really just like you met these people, you're into similar music, and you just started putting some shit together with no intention of it really just being anything more than what it is, and go from there. Just kind of that thing.
Well, we ended up just just deciding, and Dan threw some stuff together, and it's funny because Keith and I one day drove over to Dan's place, and we were chatting. We were hanging out, chatting with his mom in the kitchen while Dan took the 4-track in his bedroom, and hashed out those vocals. And what I really like about that is Spaz just took off and became a whole, a big thing, mm-hmm. and you could totally hear Dan, kind of his kind of Spaz-like vocals in that.
In Happy
recording, yeah.
What's funny, again, like they said, it was just something that it was inspired the players, and they had the means, and then you just kind of go from there. And then not only that, then other bands popped up, because there's a band that before these bands that was in one of the first, the only issue I think I got of Atmosphere. I may have gotten, because I wish I still, it's probably somewhere in something that I don't even may or may not still have around, but was in that first issue that I saw, which was on my birthday. You had a band called 976 on there, and 976 was pre-Spaz, pre-Plutocracy,
not pre-Plutocracy really, but I met the guys in Plutocracy. I interviewed 976, the whole band, mm-hmm. At Winchell's Donuts in Newark, California.
Nice. I think it was, but no, it was pre-Plutocracy.
Oh, it might have been, yeah.
It was
around the same time.
Not by much, but it was, it was mainly because Dan Hogan was in that band, and those guys they liked what he was doing, and hence started the band, because he was the first bass player in Plutocracy.
He had joined Plutocracy. He wasn't the first bass player in Plutocracy. But,
wasn't? Who was the first one?
No, it was some other dude. I forget his name right now, actually.
Yeah.
But he was brothers to one of the guys in Immortal Fate. Redheaded. I think he was like redhead.
Okay, so no, that was a different player. Okay, that was somebody else.
Second guitar player, or there's two guitar players in Immortal Fate. One of them, and he was in the band the whole time. His younger brother was the bass player of Plutocracy. Okay, so that's he's in some of those earlier photographs.
It's not a Perez though. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not one of the Perez brothers. Okay,
right,
makes sense. All right.
Yeah. And then Dan, Big Boy. I remember his nickname, and he joined, and he was a great addition to to Plutocracy. I actually hung out with him a couple times.
But I've got to be truthful to you. He's one of the greatest all-time riff merchants.
But I never really met Frank, and I didn't really know him. But he ended up being a bass player in Plutocracy, right?
Later, when they kept going after Dan, because
they kept, and I would sometimes find myself walking into a record store, I'm like, damn, I didn't know Plutocracy had another record. What the fuck, Nobody told me.
They kept it going because Frank was the band that they were in, that was that part of the scene, was Agents of Satan. That's with, Jason Balsack and what's his name, Frank's brother Matt. And so they had Agents, and then that was the band that then introduced them to the West Bay, because they were in the peninsula, but they were fans of those bands, and then became part of that whole thing in time.
Totally.
And they all
short amount of time. It probably seemed like a long time back then, but if you look back at it now,
a few years.
It's all right around the same time.
Yeah, it's the same.
I don't know.
In the 90s.
I remember going to a show at the Cactus Club, and it was a big one of those. They didn't really call it Power Violence back then. That was kind of a side name. But I remember talking to Paul Barfo at this show at the Cactus Club.
Keith went with you to that show.
Did he?
I think so, because Keith. It was like Newthgrush, Godstomper. I don't know if Spaz was on it, but it was there were some West Bay bands.
I think it was either Agents of Satan or Dead Bodies Everywhere.
Agents of Satan. It was Agents of Satan. This is before Dead Bodies Everywhere, because because Keith came back from that show going like, "Oh, Dave, man, you missed a great show, man." Like he did his classic, like you weren't there. Like, I was. And it was classic Keith. I'm like, and then I heard the bands. I'm like, Keith, you ain't even into this shit. What the fuck are you talking about?
It's funny, yeah. Keith never was into any of that shit, but he was exposed to it. You know, like he never grasped onto it. But
Well, I mean, I think he had the spirit of it. I think the thing about it, because Keith was more into the spirit of a lot of just energy of shit going on, because he was the one that wanted to go to Burning Man before.
No,
Burning
he was
Man.
down with it. He was like right on.
Yeah.
Right, he didn't get into it like I did, but he was like, oh yeah, this stuff totally makes sense. He probably kind of saw more the humor in it more than I probably took it a little more seriously. Like, oh, this is
Well, he
intense.
saw humor. The funny thing is he would perceive humor, even because I don't even think those bands they had humor to them, but like, because I've even hung out with those guys. Those guys crack me up, and yet I'll be laughing, and they'll look at me like, "What's so funny?"
Yeah.
that kind of shit. And I'm like, "Never mind. I had a funny thought. Never mind the fact that you guys crack me the fuck up, because you're all insane psychos that say hilarious shit." But that's where I'm like, I say, like, I'm part of them, but I'm also like more of a fan and an observer who got to jam with them. Or jam it, because they invited me to even like play bass in Calmex and the Riff Merchants, which I would have loved to do.
Oh, wow.
But I also just knew, I'm like, I was like, I really enjoy watching you guys, and I don't want to like cross that threshold.
Right.
Because they didn't really invite. They kept hinting like, oh, it looks like we got a third bass player going. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I love watching you guys. Because they wrote complicated.
That would have been awesome, though, Dave. Think about it. Even if for like a one-off, project, if we had that immortalized, it
also would have created some tension later on because of the first singer funeral shock bullshit.
Well, here's the thing. Towards the end of '93, I went out and stayed with my parents in Western Massachusetts.
I remember, you left for a while. Yeah.
And I might as well have just left forever at that point, because I think I was thinking about it recently now.
Maybe I would have stayed in school. Good point.
What's that?
I said maybe I would have stayed in school. Good point. I'm fucking around.
Yeah, no, you can't blame me for that. But I'm sure I was no help, and we could talk about that too. Yeah. But this is still 1993, and we didn't really start hanging out until probably
94, 95.
Yeah. But when I came back from Massachusetts, I was only there for like 3 months, but that whole scene and Spaz and everything, I think, just took off. And really, I hardly heard from those guys anymore, Yeah. I was off on doing my own thing, I guess, and I had hooked up with that band Lurch, and that was kind of a whole nother, thing. And
Describe Lurch too.
Lurch. My description of Lurch is like Steel Pole Bathtub meets I Hate God, and they were Steel Pole Bathtub, and I was I Hate God, and another band that I feel like I came in and ruined, or they. I
don't think you really.
I think certain members of that band were kind of disenchanted by my presence on this earth, but or on any earth, really. But I listen to that recording now, and it fucking kills, and it's awesome.
Great.
Like,
I love that demo.
Yeah, completely insane. And I was thinking about that last night, knowing that we might talk about it, and I remember going in. I was kind of inspired by that band Obituary. I had heard that they never wrote lyrics for any of their first two albums that I was into at that point.
They just growled. They just went.
Like, yeah, I don't think there's any words in there, and so I don't know. I guess I'm not. I didn't have the poetry at the time or something, and I just couldn't really. I was really into this band. They were really good, but I couldn't come up with any lyrics for it, so I kind of just did noise and belching and screaming and stuff.
You had a trash can at a show, I heard. I wasn't there.
That's right. We did it. Well, that was a party at Paul Lou's house, the guitar player. His mom had a music school, and a music store, and by that time the store had closed down, and they were running the music school through there. garage, which is where we practiced, and then they had a house party there with that band, Your Mother, actually.
Your Mother's gone on to some pretty much DIY local acclaim.
Yeah, and that was where I like met Craig, who
Craigum. Yeah.
Your Mother, yeah, and they were like friends. They were high school friends there, and so that was Pleasanton, you know. And so I was always the fringe guy. I was always, you know,
very different bands too. Lurch and Your Mother, like highly, like nothing musically anywhere close.
They were so Lurch was very like psychedelic. I mean, they took their name from a Steel Pole Bathtub album.
Yeah, and very much doomy. I mean, they had a much more of a dirgier. I mean, with some fast jams, but had more
very sludgy, but very and I thought it was killer. And in fact, Mario Rodriguez, who we spoke of at the
episode
beginning,
dedicated to, yes,
he's the one that hooked me up with those guys. He was going to Ohlone College, and he met Tyler and John, the drummer and bass player of that group, and Mario suggested me for a singer for their band, you know, and he gave me a tape. And lost in translation, Mario thought that they were called Lurge, Lurge. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, man. Lurge, what does that mean? Like nothing, you know. But it's like, if it sounds like what it sounds like, then it'd be awesome. And I remember like a while later saying, oh, I thought you guys were called Lurge, you know. And I was already in the band, you know, and
Lurch, dude. And
I might have even tried to persuade them for a minute to change the name, you know, but I didn't have any sway over that. And we actually had a I kind of wish we had done more. We recorded that demo, and then and I have fond memories of mixing that down with Paul, the guitar player, who I was actually really good friends with for a long time. We would, you know, they were really like dropping acid.
Yeah, I remember hanging out with you and Paul Lou a few times.
Okay, yeah, he was a nice guy. He was a really smart dude, and but just down for a good time. We would go backpacking for a week at a time. You know,
seen photos
multiple times. But I learned to drop acid with those guys, and they were a little more experienced partying and probably could handle their partying a little bit better.
You guys got into noise too. I mean, because I remember Paul Lou and John Lewis was his name, right? Yeah, because that's why I remember thinking that was kind of strange. But they all had like a similar vibe. Like even though they didn't look like John Lewis looked like he could have been your older brother, like just to look at him. And it was just in terms of like the stoniness and their kind of, you know, mystic ways. But I remember you guys did a noise. You were doing a gig at some coffee shop, and I was there.
Oh, well, that was that's funny. That was just kind of a side noise thing, though.
Exactly. And you guys were just dicking around just to look at it. And I remember a lot of like a lot of that shit, and picking up a didgeridoo and you know, tapping on a bongo and shit like that. And I remember like thinking like, oh, these guys are just they're bullshitting right now. Like there's nothing. I don't know if they have any songs between.
That was probably after the band itself.
Yeah, it was. I think it was.
We had before I even graduated high school, we had gone on the road, I guess you could call it. We went up to Seattle. Tyler, who's the drummer, his brother was in a band up in Seattle called Monster Truck Driver, and they were around for a long time. Mm-hmm. And Tyler went up there to become second guitar player for that band. Okay. So we went up there to send him off, and we played a few gigs around there, which was a lot of fun. And we had a good time. But I remember driving back being really disillusioned with the whole situation. The last thing that Tyler ever said to me was fag. And yeah, last thing he ever said to me. I remember being like, and I was very stoned, and I probably said something super, super cheesy to him. So I probably, you know, I don't know. I think it was an insult. And
like we went to a Slayer show because you and Doug and I went to in '94. We went to go see Slayer when Paul Bostaph was in the band, and they played at Santa Cruz. Mm-hmm. And the last words, remember the show? I remember one of the comments from Tom Araya was like, "Oh, Santa Cruz, a lot of smoke in here." And so I remember as they finished playing, I think they did their last encore or whatever, if there was one. and Paul Bostaff, an infinite, Newark resident, mind you, Paul Bostaff, he's not Dave Lombardo, he's a good drummer, but not Dave Lombardo. He then thinks it's a good idea to get on the mic, and he goes, "Later, fags."
Wow.
And leaves, and then people start booing him.
Oh,
And
wow.
I remember that, and it's a classic 80s, 90s metalhead idiot fucking line. That's the parting word of a guy, the last memory of a dude that yeah, that obviously didn't really, good riddance. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. And I remember being kind of just really disillusioned by that whole situation. Cause I was the black sheep in that band, and I felt like it, and I couldn't hang. And I remember just sitting in the back of that truck on the whole way home from Seattle, just pouting, just feeling like, I was just down and bummed out. You know how it is with bands, and you just kind of, it's a live and learn situation. It could be heartbreaking at times and stuff. And, but I ended up having like the rest of that. I made it back in time to do my graduation. That was a bone that I threw to my parents, to show up for the ceremony, which wasn't real actual high school, because I was in independent study by that time. So it was just me and a few pregnant girls. But I ended up having like the rest of that summer having the time of my life, like tromping around with Paul and just having a good time. Probably Keith.
In between those bands too, in between Happy and Lurch and it's funny that you mentioned Kindred's Energy, because that's when you did one of your my birthday party, and I believe you had a party at your house where you did your short-lived one-man band
Pity Party. Were you at that party at my house?
Yeah, Snot Locker played that show.
Okay, that's right. Yeah.
Remember, we drove everybody. That was we drove we had like maybe started because the place was packed for your set. I think Bobby Johnson's band played later that night too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And but in between that was Snot Locker, where we had it was after your set. Everybody was laughing and enjoying your shit, which was strange because your style of music was like over their heads. Then it was us, and we had probably about 6 people to start like actually paying attention because everybody's having a cigarette break. By the end of our set, we had no one in that. No one in that garage. We drove everybody out, which I'm proud of. Just kind of looking back on it.
I remember being kind of a thing back then. I remember hearing about it sometimes, probably from you.
Oh, it was great. No, I mean it was it's testament to sticking to your or was it just staying committed? But you also, I mean, I'm just saying what was the brief? I mean, describe Pity Party. That was just my one-man noise band. I didn't put a lot of thought into anything back then. I just had an idea and I ran with it, and it wasn't because I didn't have a band. It was I don't even know where it came up. You made stickers at the time too. You had
I still have a ton of them too.
Oh,
yeah,
you do?
I had an Elisa's HR-16 drum machine or something like that, and I was I had done a few project bands with a few different people with that, programming drums, and I was writing songs, and then I think I just ended up just doing noise. I don't know how that really came about. I still have some recordings. I'll dig them up sometime.
You should put that up on your Bandcamp for because you've been putting out the old music on there.
Yeah, I'll get back on that wagon. Hopefully,
it was fun because the thing I liked about it was I mean, because I remember we had you on. I don't even know how that came about, like because I knew I was doing my birthday and I'm playing, my band's playing. I don't even know how I knew that you had a one-man band or we communicated. It's like, yeah, I got a one-man band. Oh, fuck yeah, you're playing. And you came and played at the thing. And I think the part that we all remember was you wrote a song based on the biggest identifier of my parents' house at the time. Yeah, so the song's about Dave Gordillo's house. It's called 4 Large Pillars. And I
probably wrote the song just so I could remember how to get to your house.
Yeah, and you it was just one of those like 3-second like blah blah blah, whatever songs. But it was but yeah, it was like we all laughed at like 4 Large Pillars, and I'll always remember that. What's funny is I went and visited my parents' old house, and the 4 pillars are still there, but they're all crooked because I mean everything's dilapidated now in this fucking town that no one keeps it in shape. But
I mean, you live right down the street from there now, pretty
I
much.
don't live far from there at all. We didn't walk there. We walked by my house before that. But when I was first in recovery, my mom was driving me to NA meetings. We took a trip over there just to kind of check it out. And I looked, I'm like, because I used to tell my folks, I'm like, I wish you never left that house and bought the house that they did. And then when we saw the house later, I'm like, I'm wrong. Because my stepdad used to be like, Dave, you were right about that. And I remember thinking, like, am I? I don't think so. Because like over time, the house that they ended up getting in Union City was a much better investment. And they did well selling that house later on, much better than they would have if they stayed in the house in Newark. So, but
I ended up going, once we started hanging out, I ended up going over to that house a few times with you guys.
Yeah. No, but that was. I mean, you'd come over to my old house there because once I graduated, they moved from there to the Union City house, which I would say was like kind of Snowy Plover headquarters. As far as I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
Really, I mean, between that house and your parents, well, not just your parents, but then the house you moved out of to the one over the one near the infamous murder scene of Newark.
We had the one in Fremont first. Way over there.
Right. You did have. Well, no, there was that house in Fremont. Yeah.
Yeah, near Stevenson, where that neighbor came out and
yelled at you. Yeah.
Shoot us both out.
No, I wasn't there. I wanted to be. I was thinking about taking
slashing his tires, huh?
Yeah.
You wanted to take revenge on that guy, and I'm like,
I was pissed for you. I wasn't even there. I was like,
yeah, that's funny.
Because I'm like, I'm the loud one. You want to yell at somebody? Yell at me. Like Dennis is playing drums.
That's where we would, that's where we would swing that microphone.
We did a lot of tricks over there.
Yeah, I think my roommates must have hated us, but they still brought us to the next house. And
totally. No, and they let us jam. They wanted us to jam in that spot with them, like in the garage. So we even put up the sign, the Snowy Plover Resting Area sign on the door.
Yeah. We definitely took over. Like when we moved to that Newark house, we took over. It was like that guy Curtis's band.
Yeah.
And his dad built, the soundproofing of that. And everything, but we took over.
We just went in there like, oh, thanks, right on. Don't mind if we do. Didn't stay here all night. If you guys want to come jam with us, you're welcome to. But,
totally, yeah. Everyone's welcome. Come on in. It's a free for all. But no thoughts to ever we're not putting you out here or anything, are we?
We made ourselves right at home. It was funny too how that was. But I think, to be quite honest, we were probably more creatively driven at the time than.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there was a lot more of because whenever you'd run across people, it's like, we got a band. I'm like, do you really?
Yeah.
And more or less, I think, because our band was more driven by jamming, recording, and I mean, we didn't even play that many shows. It was funny because later on, I got more into playing shows. I wanted to play more shows with Snowy Plover.
You always wanted to do more, and I'm like, I think we need a little more rehearsal.
Yeah, we would. There was definitely a lot of. I mean, it was funny because we all were various cooks in the kitchen. What's funny is, again, you bring up Lurch and your mother because also you may have crossed paths with them at the time. Was Dan Smith, who ended up jamming with us later on.
I met Dan Smith through Paul of Lurch.
Because I remember that connection.
Right. Yeah, because he was, and he worked at Tower Records with Craig and John Lewis. So that's where I
learned the infamous what do you call it, loss prevention, how much you could get away with been stolen at a Tower Records before it alerts.
Really? That's funny. Yeah, those guys I do remember.
Quota, the loss quota, and learning about that, I learned that from them. They stole mass amounts of shit. That's what I remember.
Yes, they did. I remember that very well.
But yeah, so the timeline of your band. So you were in, you started your zine, you jammed with Cloud for a bit. You did Pity Party. Lurch was later, and then and now we get to the fact that once we started jamming, then becomes that whole. You can go back to the previous episode, and that's the whole timeline of those bands. But jump ahead to, again, roughly around 2001, I think it was. That was when I was at that show, and I introduced myself to Dan Lactose. And I just said, hi, I'm Dave. I'm actually old friends with a guy Dennis Cullen. And he's like, yeah, I know Dennis. What's up with him? And I'm like, oh, he's good. You know, I gave him, you know, whatever, you know, he's up in Humboldt and whatever. And, you know, I was jamming with him for a while. And we just got to talking. I think we stayed, I don't even know how the exchange was, but basically that's was where I initiated contact and started getting into trading stuff with him, because I'd been doing a label at the time. I think I might have even handed him a flyer for like my Wolfman Records releases or something.
Okay, so you were already doing that. That's right, because you started that with Woozor, right?
I started when Woozor was where, because of Paul from Godstomper, I learned how to basically just make our own records. So we pressed our own, we recorded our own stuff at Bart Thurber's House of Faith. Started pressing our own records and got some notice from our demos even. Max Ward, of all, you know, again, for all of Max's differences and, you know, and people have their opinions on him. I had my opinion on him before I met him and got to know him a little bit. But I'll always credit, we got more response from his negative review of a Woozor demo in Short, Fast, and Loud.
How funny.
I didn't even know there was a review, and then found out through Masha Vass that his column.
I gotta see if I have that.
His positive reviews were always short for something like, yeah, check it out, great stuff, da-da-da. He gives this long review, very descriptive of bands he doesn't like, to describe us. Labels us as sexist because of the song title Like This or Like That Bitch, which had nothing to do with women. It was just funny, the review that we got from him. But then I had at least like 3 responses from that review alone. One of them from a guy in prison, which I thought was hilarious. So from there, and we ended up, because we were like, I remember that's how I met Andy from Mortville, because I was sending demos to him, and I again was just starting to get into the DIY shit.
Look at this fucking asshole out here standing by his tailgate waiting on his groceries. He's been like this for like 3 fucking minutes now, despite a sign that says remain in your vehicle for a no contact experience. But there he is. What a fucking dick.
That you initiated, and here I am into it way, later in the 90s, probably after its heyday for the most part, or I want to say after its initial heyday of power violence being popular. But what ended up happening was the DIY scene just blew up. It's still everybody just followed that model from the early 80s hardcore scene and just kept doing it. They just, they really, independent labels pop up, they come and they go, but it just became what I started, because that's when I met Jeff from Capitalist Casualties. He actually found a flyer of mine in a Godstomper record and then emailed me about doing a trade.
No kidding.
Yeah, and then I started a contact with Chris Dodge, because he had Slap-A-Ham. I might have even name dropped you in some shit talking to him, and but I just started getting into that relationship of just writing to people when I had something that I liked, and sending them demos, and then we pressed our own records and sent that. So Dan I met during the tail end of Woozor, because of name dropping you, and then we started trading some records and contact, and then it was because of that then I also played a show with Calmex and the Riff Merchants with my one-man band. So that's when, and I started being more contact with the guys from that band, with Frank and Jason and Snowman and all them. And then, but it was Jason who then emailed me and asked if I knew any drummers who would be interested in starting this hardcore punk rock band that him and Dan had an idea for. And I just told him I can play drums. I don't know any drummers that aren't in a million bands, but I'm not in any band. I'm just doing a one-man band, and I can play drums and have a drum set. So I could see if I could do it. I'll try it out. I don't know. I said, don't get your hopes up. I remember telling him that. But, and then, cause he said it was just really something simple, Misfits style, like more underground hardcore shit. But like, they said, if it's just real simple. So, and then it was just me and Dan who went to Lennon Studios first. And I didn't know, it wasn't until I got the chop. It took me about a half hour to figure out the chop beat that just like is 90% of all hardcore.
Didn't they show you a beat?
No, really, it was just he was playing me a riff, and they knew it. They don't know really. Again, I'm not a technically trained drummer, Neither are they. Everything's all, kind of on the approach. It just took me a minute to realize what 90% of those beats are is just that shit.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
And once I figured that out on my own, like kind of just listening to Dan's riff and then realizing like what it was, and I'm like, oh, that shit's easy. Or not easy, but like it's not as I was making it more difficult trying to I was just overthinking it. And once I figured out that chop beat, we ended up writing like 2.5 songs in 3 hours. And then went from there. And the next thing you know, we started Funeral Shop, which was the band that I would dare say was reconnected you with those guys, because we formed.
I was still kind of loosely connected. Like I would send them stuff. I would send them our stuff all the time. I have a few communications with Dan over the years. I think I think Max, because he was like doing the demo reviews, so I would send him stuff. I think he reviewed like a Candy Muscle thing. He did a write up on that or something. I would send Chris stuff. I would I don't know if I was trying to get reviews or just kind of keep in touch with those guys. It was always me reaching out to them. Like I'd send them just like, hey, check it out, And I remember, sometimes I'd get like, oh yeah, cool, not really what we're looking for, but like, that's cool. I'll just,
I was encouraging you to send. Cause I remember Chris Dodge gave probably one of his most favorable, I would say one of his most complimentary reviews of Candy Muscle.
Right.
Like he was talking about how original it sounded.
Yeah, well, and that guy knew eclectic music for sure. So he would know where to draw from, but. Going back to Plover, I kind of regret to this day, not, taking your advice and getting more, contacting those guys and trying to set up shows with them and stuff, because we would have been great, we would have been great on a Newth Grush bill or something, I
think so, but at the same, like I said, I always look, anytime that I would think it, believe me, back 10 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, fucking A, but now, the way I look at it and just kind of like I see, knowing Keith, knowing us, and I have a feeling had that happen, it would have fractured our friendships at an earlier time.
Well, if we had, I don't know, who knows? I mean,
who knows? But
our friendships definitely got fractured. So
yeah, even still, but I mean, like over time, I think because our egos were, I always felt that Snowy Plover was a band that was like our combined neuroses of fear. Like we were all like afraid of shit, but we wouldn't admit it to one another. And we brought it together to like this monster sound that I dare say was like, I liked it because I could listen to a band that I felt scared me. I liked that shit. And it was named after a fucking bird that was too dumb to stay out of the road, Which
I was always insecure because I didn't feel like I had the chops on the drums, and and you are always our biggest cheerleader, really, saying no, you guys are great, and you're still my biggest cheerleader. Like whenever I feel like I can't freaking keep a steady beat, I'll just fuck it, you don't need a steady beat, just play,
you had a style. I remember because the things I liked about your drumming were the very things that you didn't like at the time.
Right.
But then later.
I was talking to Dan last night or yesterday. We went on a nice little 25-mile bike ride yesterday, and I was telling him kind of the same thing about a lot of stuff I listened to. A lot of things I liked and the things I listened to were, I think, mistakes. But it gave it like a flavor, and
accident.
Now I'm like, oh wait, I think that was actually a flub. Like, but that was my favorite part of that song, and that's the thing is I'm just the biggest my own critic. When I make a mistake, I don't realize someone else is probably hearing it, going, oh no, that was awesome. So
what they don't hear.
I can't get out of my
lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes in Funeral Shop.
But with that scene, that spaz scene, it took off, and I was like, looking back, in all honesty, I was a little disillusioned with the whole thing because I kind of felt like I don't really hear from those guys anymore, and it took off, and I remember actually being super bummed. I've never really told this story, but I was at Gilman at I think it was like the second what did they call it, Fiesta Grande. The first Fiesta Grande was freaking.
It was huge.
Incredible. It was like Ass Suck and Crossed Out and No Comment, all these bands that I worshipped, and A Man Is the Bastard, and I don't know, Plutocracy might have played it. And then I think I went to the second one, or the third one. I don't remember which. I might have gone to the second one, and I tried to go to the third. I think it was the second one. I remember it. And it was like a line wrapped around the corner. I got there thinking it was casual, and I remember Max Ward walking by going, "You got to go get in line, man." And I was like, 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 yeah, nice to see you. Like literally like less than a year before that, I was like drinking 40s with those dudes, in the parking lot before a show.
Slightly rock star.
Those guys showed me how to shoulder tap at that liquor store down the street from there.
Yeah.
And it was all industrial over there, so we would go in weird little like industrial areas to party or whatever. But yeah, it was. So I kind of was disillusioned with that whole thing. So I stayed out. I stayed on the fringes, and I still really liked the music. So I bought the records, mail order, and kind of send them our demos and stuff like that. But I just felt like there was like a dividing line when you were always trying to get me to get Plover in with, those guys. I'm like, I don't know, I don't really know.
I get what you're saying. The funny thing is because it's like, if there was a guy that I wish we ran across during the Plover days that would have made it was Paul Barfo from Godstomper, because that relationship, when I met him, not only did I just, I love the guy and him and Danny, but because, I mean, the fact that they were Mexican, I'm Mexican, but we're also like metalheads and we were, I just related to them on many levels, being the music we were into, seeing somebody who made original music, who also worked harder. Paul works harder to be egoless in any of that to this day, that when they still play, Paul invests money in merchandise that he gives away. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, every time I see that guy, he'll always hook me up with a bunch of. I just got a bunch of Godstomper gear the last time I saw him, when I was just getting their new CD split with Captain Three Leg to him, and it's just and Paul also hasn't aged a fucking day in the entire time that I've known him. But he was the guy that again put me on to Aardvark and United Pressing, which then I made our initial records with. And just made it just like, yeah, this is all you have to do. He didn't, and even when he plays shows, like it's funny to watch him, almost be counterintuitive sometimes to like, I've watched them play a show where everybody was playing on the stage, and it was, a small show, but it's still, good turnout. Everybody's playing on the stage, it's no problem. Godstomper is the headliner, and they just have to play on the floor. And in doing so, the cords to the mics would not reach where they were playing. So they didn't have any mics for their vocals.
But still, they would play on the floor.
They would play, and it disappointed like a couple people who wanted the Godstomper. I'm like, Paul, why can't you just play on the fucking stage with
we are of the people.
We're of the people. We gotta play here and have no mics, and Paul's just gonna yell over his, and you're just gonna see him yell, but you can't hear him for shit. And it's just, you gotta love it. Huh?
That's admirable.
Oh, totally. So, but and then in the end, the thing about it, with all of our musical history, the band that also again was cool to kind of like because my last band was Bad Touch. That was the band that gave birth to MeanDave and all this, shit and whatever. And it's still, I put Bad Touch in like it's the last chapter of this musical journey of Snowy Plover, Tonopah, Woozor, because Bad Touch was definitely a spin-off of a lot of my ideas that I loved in Woozor, but that were my own. And we covered even a Woozor song and we made it our own and stuff. But you got into you liked what we were putting down, and we're like a big part in recording us, with our initial songs and stuff. And it made it fun. It was a lot of fun to kind of like, work with you and do it. And also Bad Touch started from songs that I wrote for your band, the Bug Pedals.
That's right.
One of which we did play.
I love how there's a through line through all that,
Because I wrote a bunch of these songs that because originally I just wrote these songs, and I'm like, there were ideas that came from nowhere. They were kind of poppy, but some were like a little more like catchy metal or whatever, and I didn't know what to do with them. So I just recorded them, kept them. And then when I was in Bug Pedals, Mean Song was definitely inspired. It was a response to I Don't Like You from the Bug Pedals, a song I love. and I was like, that's a mean song. Well, I'm gonna write a song called The Mean Song, and then wrote The Mean Song, and then so then later, and I had these other songs, and I submitted them like to you as like, hey, these songs might work in Bug Pedals too. And I remember you guys heard them, and you're like, we'll stick with The Mean Song. like it was, you're like, they're not bad, they're cool, but I just don't see them working in Bug Pedals. And it wasn't like some massive rejection or whatever. It was just more like, oh, okay, well, I thought it could work, but okay.
Well, it was like molasses trying to get anything to really happen with that band anyway. And those were tumultuous times for, I think, everybody. Right?
Oh, totally. But it was funny just to have that, be the case. And then, but I ended up taking those songs in response to, because I think we had a slight falling out when I quit Bug Pedals, but that wasn't like, we didn't hold the grudge as long as, after the Plover reunion. And, but I ended up taking those songs and being like, I should start my own band with this shit. And then I was thinking, who's a drummer that I could get who could play these songs, but also be like just have the ability to I don't know, just kind of, there's something about it. And Eric Alverson, aka Eric B, our friend from who was part of our music scene in our area, was only doing rapping at the time. He was mainly doing rapping. He jammed with Nate, and I mentioned it in our previous conversation. He jammed with Nate in a band called God Awful. So I knew that he had drum chops. Plus, he also played at the first, I think there's some damage. He was my first live drummer at my birthday party with God Stomper and Jason doing Bird Spanker in my garage. Like yeah, it was. And I have the recording of it too. It's like totally blown out, but I loved it. And Eric played drums on that, so I knew he had drum chops. I just didn't know he had natural ability, but I didn't know if it'd be something that would interest him. And I'd seen him a couple of times. I had his demo from his rap. He had his rap alter ego called Eric Isley. That was great. And but he hadn't been doing anything, so I just hit him up out of the blue and was like, "Hey, do you want to? I have this idea for a band. It's basically Don Rickles and Triumph the Insult Comic Dog playing it through Black Flag's equipment, as if it's just the guitar player and the drummer from the Danzig band, doing that shit." And Eric was like, "Hell yeah!" Like he just said yeah, and then we put that shit together, and the next thing you know, we were doing that, and it was MeanDave and Crazy Eric, Bad Touch.
Yeah, I liked what you guys were doing. I always liked his drumming style.
Exactly. No,
I definitely was stoked I got to record you guys too.
Yeah. No, and you added. I mean, it's one of those things. If I hadn't done so much coke and been so caught up in a lot of bullshit, it was. You took the time to have patience with us and really kind of get dialed in on recordings and stuff, and it was cool. I thought it was really cool that I was able to create something that you took an active interest in beyond just being a part of the thing. So it was really cool. So
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Awkward pause and perfect time.
What we were talking about.
Yeah, I want to thank you. I think we hit our hour mark a little over.
Okay, yeah. Right on. Well, you're just gonna keep having me on until I really put my foot in my mouth, right?
Not really. No, this was, again, like I said, these were the bands that I know wanted that again, because there's a lot. I mean, we've shared a lot musically, both what our interests are in music, what we participated in. We could talk forever about this shit. I know I can. I don't know about you. You get tired, and then I have to speak for an hour.
I get a little low energy.
But I know you gotta Zoom with your family later, so I want to give you a little break before that. So
cool. Well, I'll see you. I'll be here next week then. Same time. Same. I'm kidding.
Wonderful, man. Well, yeah, we'll probably have another Friends episode in a few weeks too. So I'll hit up the guys and see about doing that. So,
right on. I'm gonna watch these eventually too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here's the thing.
Watching myself. So.
This was funny. The episode between your previous two and this one was an episode with my friend Akil.
I watched that today.
Well, we were talking about recovery. All right, I've had some awful episodes on my thing with no thumbs downs on YouTube.
I noticed there was a thumbs down on that.
There was a thumbs down on it.
Yeah,
some hating motherfucker had to put a thumbs down on a recovery episode.
That's bullshit. It wasn't me. I thumbsed up it because Yeah.
Thank you. But even still, it's like I'm just like there's other episodes where I could be like, all right, I get the thumbs. Even there was no thumbs down on me talking over you for an hour on the second half of that.
And I noticed that you said that the ratings were down because we should do more. If the ratings are tanking, then that means you double down.
Poor Dennis. We'll kill this fucking show. How about that, man? We'll just fucking bury this. All for Mario too. I'm
gonna get my one-man noise band back together, Dave, so we could really
do it.
Help this in.
You get Pity Party to play the last fucking show of In the Meantime. All right.
That's right. And
Definitely
it's 5 hours long.
Exactly. Just like Ohm in Jerusalem.
Cool, man. Good to see you, Dave.
You as well, man. Thanks for talking, man.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Chat soon.
I'm